At 2:32 p.m. on an ordinary Tuesday, a doorbell camera in Bushy captured a small familiar moment. A front door opening, a brief exchange, and a figure at the threshold holding a bag that looked like returned belongings. Nothing about the scene looks urgent. No sirens, no shouting, no obvious threat. Just a quiet cul-de-sac, a tidy, detached home, and the kind of routine interaction neighbors see every day, one of those moments that only feels important after it's already over. In true crime, we often search for a warning sign we should have seen. This case is unsettling because in the minutes before everything shifted, the record shows mostly normal life work schedules, errands, messages, and a family moving through a typical summer week. Before we go further, I want to ask you to watch this, like an investigator, not a spectator. Based on the facts alone, where does the first measurable change appear on camera, in a timeline, or in someone's documented decisions? Leave your take in the comments. The victims were Carol Hunt, 61, and her daughters Hannah Hunt, 28, and Louise Hunt, 25. They were a close-knit family in Hertfordshire, known locally for being warm, polite, and dependable, the kind of people whose names show up on school lists, community groups, and family photos. Louise was the youngest. During the COVID lockdown, she built a small business called Groom and Glow, working from a converted pod in the family's garden. Clients described her as gentle and attentive with their dogs, and her workdays followed a steady rhythm of appointments and cleanups. Hannah worked at an anti-aging clinic in Radlett, where colleagues considered her a strong therapist with loyal clients. She was in a long-term relationship with Alex Clean. To people around her, Hannah's life looked structured: work, family, and plans. Their father, John Hunt, was well known nationally as BBC Radio 5 Live's main racing commentator. But in the home, he was simply Dad, the one with the work schedule to manage and the family routines to return to after broadcasts and travel. Bushy is the kind of place that sells itself on quietness, tree-lined streets, short drives to shops, familiar faces at the local church. Carol was active at St. James's Church on Bushy High Street, and friends described her as unusually kind and welcoming. The Hunt home on Ashland Close sat in a typical suburban pocket, parked cars, trimmed hedges, neighbors who recognize one another. There's no sense of isolation here. It's the kind of street where a delivery van or a visitor at the door barely registers. In late June 2024, the family's days still looked ordinary on the surface: work hours, errands, and Louise's appointments in the garden pod. If there was tension somewhere, it wasn't visible from the outside. The household continued moving on schedule, and that's the point we need to hold on to. Because the story doesn't begin with chaos, it begins with familiarity. A normal afternoon, a front door, a person who didn't look like a stranger. Right before the timeline takes its first sharp turn. The pre-incident record begins well before July 2024, with a relationship that, to outsiders, looked routine. Louise Hunt met Kyle Marcus Clifford in late 2022. Friends and family saw a couple in their mid-20s who appeared settled, with Kyle visiting the Hunt home on Ashland Close and joining ordinary family meals. Kyle Clifford was born April 5, 1998. He had served briefly with the Queen's Dragoon Guards and left the military in 2022. Later, he worked as a security guard at a fire and security firm. In the public record, those details matter because they establish identity, employment, and a traceable timeline. Investigators also noted Kyle's family background as part of context. His older brother, Bradley Clifford, was serving a life sentence for murder linked to a 2017 case involving a vehicle and teenage moped riders. That information didn't explain what happened later, but it was a documented fact attached to the suspect's profile. Inside the relationship, people close to Louise later described a shift that was subtle at first: changes in what she wore, how she presented herself, and what social plans she made. These weren't dramatic public incidents. They were small, repeated constraints, details that became clearer only in hindsight, through statements and notes. Friends also reported episodes that made them uncomfortable. Jealousy about male friendships, temper during driving, and moments where Kyle treated cruelty as entertainment, like sharing a video of an animal being harmed and reacting with laughter when others were disturbed. It was a behavior snapshot, not a single explosive event. At Kyle's workplace, supervisors and colleagues later described a pattern degrading comments about women and attitudes they recognized as misogynistic. Again, the case file doesn't rely on interpretation, only on what was reported and later referenced publicly as part of the broader picture of escalation risk. Another documented detail during the relationship, Kyle maintained profiles on dating apps like Hinge and Bumble. That fact, as later reported, undercut the idea of a stable, exclusive partnership. It also mattered because digital activity leaves timestamps, accounts, and records an evidentiary trail. 5 days before the killings, Louise created a note on her phone titled, "When You're Sad, Look." In it, she listed concerns she had observed: racist views, transphobic comments, belittling language, and a volatile temper. The significance is simple. It's time-stamped documentation from Louise herself. On July 3, 2024, Louise reshared a message online about the strength it takes to leave. The post doesn't prove an outcome, but it is a traceable marker of where she was publicly in that period. In investigative storytelling, those small markers help anchor time without speculation. The breakup itself was described by John Hunt as calm and mature. Key dates matter here. The record places the relationship ending on June 26, 2024. In cases of intimate partner violence, the period immediately after separation is often treated as a critical escalation window because behavior changes become measurable. What followed is not a theory. It's a set of recorded actions. Within days, Kyle began ordering items online that were later central to the investigation: a Horizon Cornet MXT 405 compound crossbow with bolts, a 10-inch steel butcher knife, and large quantities of duct tape, rope, and petrol. He also attempted to purchase a CO2 Glock air pistol, though reporting indicates it would not arrive in time. The relevance is not the object itself, it's the pattern. Multiple acquisitions clustered in a narrow window after the breakup. Creating a procurement timeline investigators could later map precisely. During the same period, Kyle's online activity showed him researching John Hunt's work schedule by looking up horse racing events, aiming to identify when John would be away from home. He also viewed Carol Hunt's Facebook page, learning routines and habits. This is surveillance by open source, not guesswork. He checked weather forecasts for July 9, 2024, another small but telling data point because it timestamps intent to act on a specific day. Investigators later treated these searches as part of a preparation sequence schedule location. Familiarity conditions, each step logged digitally. On July 4th, CCTV captured Kyle at a B&Q store purchasing duct tape. In isolation, it looks like a normal errand. In a case file, it becomes a corroborated purchase tied to later physical evidence. That's how escalation appears in real-time, ordinary actions with later relevance. The night before the murders, prosecutors later said, Kyle watched multiple videos by Andrew Tate, content described in court as promoting violent misogyny. The fact here is the viewing activity and its timing, not any psychological conclusion. That same period also included letters Kyle wrote to family members. By the end of July 8th, the record shows a tight cluster of documented steps: purchases, searches, scheduled checks, open source monitoring, and written correspondence. Whatever anyone believed they were seeing on the surface, the measurable trail points to preparation. And at that point, before the calendar turns to July 9th, the build-up phase is complete. Tuesday, July 9th, 2024, unfolded like a typical summer afternoon in Bushy. The weather was stable. The street on Ashland Close showed no disruption. Work schedules and daily routines continued as expected, according to later police summaries. By early afternoon, activity around the Hunt home remained ordinary. Louise was working from the garden pod. Carol was inside the house. John Hunt was away for work. Nothing in the public record suggests alarm or interruption at this stage. At 1:40 p.m., Kyle Clifford parked near Ashland Close. CCTV and digital records later placed him in the area. He remained in his vehicle, briefly observing the surroundings. No interaction was recorded at that moment. He exited the vehicle and checked which cars were in the driveway, then returned to his car. Investigators would later link this pause to online checks confirming John Hunt's work schedule. The activity viewed alone appeared routine. At 2:32 p.m., the front doorbell camera captured Kyle approaching the door. He was carrying a bag and presented himself as returning Louise's belongings. The interaction at the threshold appeared calm and conversational. Seconds later, at approximately 2:33 p.m., Kyle entered the house. From this point, the timeline moves largely out of public view. What is known comes from later forensic findings and confirmed time markers, not continuous video. Carol Hunt was the first victim. Police records place her death shortly after entry. There is no evidence of calls or messages sent from the house during this period. Outside, the street remained quiet. For roughly 35 minutes, there was no recorded movement away from the property. During that same window, customers continued arriving at the side gate for Louise's grooming appointments, unaware of what had occurred inside. At approximately 3:07 p.m., Kyle left the house briefly and returned with a crossbow concealed under a blanket. CCTV later confirmed this movement. He re-entered the property and the house fell silent again. Louise finished her workday and entered the house at 4:11 p.m. Doorbell audio captured prolonged screaming. No outbound calls were recorded at that moment. The data shows a clear shift from routine to emergency without visual confirmation of events inside. At 5:31 p.m., a message was sent from Louise's phone to John Hunt asking what time he would be home. Investigators later identified this as a key data point confirming phone access during the confinement period. Later, digital logs showed searches related to disabling smoke alarms. No calls for help were recorded during this interval. Outside neighbors reported nothing unusual, an example of parallel normalcy and internal crisis. At 6:49 p.m., Hannah Hunt arrived home and called her mother's phone. There was no answer. She entered the house moments later. Within minutes, at 6:52 p.m., Hannah sent a text message to her boyfriend Alex Clean, urging him to call police immediately. At 6:57 p.m., Hannah placed a 999 call. In the recording, she reported being shot and stated that her mother and sister had also been attacked. She gave the address before the call disconnected. Emergency services were dispatched immediately. Armed police and ambulance crews were sent to Ashland Close, treating the situation as an active and severe incident. When responders arrived, Hannah was found alive but critically injured near the doorway. Despite rapid response, Carol Hunt, Louise Hunt, and Hannah Hunt were all pronounced dead at the scene. At that moment, the incident was formally classified as a major crime. The timeline up to this point was complete. What followed would move from response to pursuit. Once the scale of the incident was confirmed, investigators moved quickly to identify a suspect. Evidence at the scene, combined with witness information and digital records, pointed to a single individual with a direct personal connection to the Hunt family, Kyle Marcus Clifford. Police established that Clifford had been in a relationship with Louise Hunt and had visited the Ashland Close address previously. That familiarity, along with confirmed vehicle sightings and device data, placed him at the center of the inquiry within hours of the emergency response. CCTV footage from the surrounding area showed Clifford leaving Ashland Close shortly after the final emergency call. Camera coverage along nearby roads helped investigators trace the direction of travel away from Bushy. As the night progressed, the focus shifted from confirmation to containment. Hertfordshire Constabulary took the lead, supported by the Metropolitan Police. Armed officers, specialist search teams, and air support were deployed. By the morning of July 10th, police issued a public appeal. Clifford's name, age, and photograph were released alongside a clear warning he was believed to be armed and dangerous, and members of the public were told not to approach him. Search efforts concentrated around Enfield, where Clifford was known to have local ties. Parks, cemeteries, and wooded areas were checked methodically. For hours, there were no confirmed sightings. Late on July 10th, armed officers located Clifford in Lavender Hill Cemetery. The area was secured as specialist units moved in, treating the situation as high risk due to the possibility that he was still carrying a weapon. As officers approached, Clifford inflicted a serious injury on himself using the same crossbow linked to the earlier attack. Police confirmed no shots were fired by officers during the encounter. He was taken into custody at the scene and transported to hospital under armed guard. At that point, police confirmed the immediate threat to the public had been contained. The manhunt was over. The suspect was located, secured, and under control. What remained was a case that would now move from pursuit to evidence accountability and the legal process still ahead. After Kyle Clifford was in custody, the investigation shifted into evidence preservation and case building. Scenes were processed as major crime scenes, with forensic teams collecting trace material, documenting layouts, and securing digital devices tied to the victims and the suspect. Key forensic findings established the manner of death for Carol Louise and Hannah Hunt and supported a sequence of events without relying on speculation. Physical traces consistent with restraint were documented. These findings became the backbone that anchored time and contact inside the property. DNA evidence, as later presented, linked Clifford to sexual assault against Louise Hunt. Combined with physical residue and scene documentation, prosecutors treated that strand as a separate chargeable offense, supported by laboratory confirmation rather than interpretation. Digital evidence provided structure. CCTV and doorbell camera material established arrival and movement at the address, while phone activity and messages, especially the text sent from Louise's phone to John Hunt, were used to show device access at specific times. Search history and online activity were also referenced as part of the preparation record. The scale of the investigation was reflected in volume reporting, later stated that investigators reviewed thousands of hours of CCTV and conducted extensive interviews. The goal was corroboration matching independent sources until a single narrative could be proven beyond reasonable doubt. The legal timeline then moved quickly. On July 11, 2024, Clifford was arrested on suspicion of 3 counts of murder. On September 17, 2024, charges were formally set out at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from hospital, including 3 counts of murder, false imprisonment, and weapons offenses. A rape charge relating to Louise Hunt was later added. At Cambridge Crown Court on December 19, 2024, Clifford entered not guilty pleas. On January 22, 2025, he changed his plea, admitting the murders, while continuing to deny rape. The rape trial began March 3, 2025, and on March 6, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict after a short deliberation. At sentencing, the judge summarized the court's findings in restrained terms and imposed 3 whole-life orders. The sentence marked the legal endpoint. Clifford would never be released. For the Hunt family, the verdict did not reverse what was lost. Public statements from relatives focused on grief impact and the reality that court outcomes are not closure. The case left a documented record of escalation preparation and consequence facts that remain long after sentencing.